record button, and it says it's recording.
Yep.
Recording.
Okay.
All right. I know it's recording, but Pam, there is a way to make her the I can't even say that word. Moderator.
Tell me how to do that.
During the headlights, I was like, I know there's a way, but I was hoping
Let's see.
I suggested it, but I don't know how to do it.
I'm getting participants down here.
I think you click on her and you there's going to be a little square that says mute or like 3 dots. What is that? Ellipsis, I guess.
There's one that says more. Let's see. Make host.
Yep. And then she can direct the screens. Yes, we got it.
Okay, there you go.
Hey guys, thanks so much. I'm sorry about everything. Zoom is not the way that it's supposed to be, but we're gonna roll with it because this is such an important topic right now that I want us to talk about. So I'm very excited to have you guys. Thank you so much for joining me. I have Dr. Pamela Hernandez-Kaufman. She holds a doctorate degree in psychology, a licensed marriage and family therapist with over 20 years of experience. She maintains a therapy practice in California and in Tennessee and specializes in working with the Hispanic audience and dealing with trauma, abuse, domestic violence, anger management, and conflict resolution. She is a published author, certified as a life coach, crisis interventionist, disaster relief mental health responder, and an ordained minister. So I love you.
I didn't know that, Pam. I've known Pam for a long time. I didn't know you were an ordained minister. That's awesome.
That is awesome. You have an impressive resume. And we also have Victoria Valdez, is a Spanish-speaking master of marriage and family therapy clinician. She works with children, teens, and families and located in Brentwood, Tennessee. Victoria specializes in working with trauma, grief, parenting, and more. She is a wife and has 2 children. So I'm excited to have both of you guys here for this episode of Real, Raw, Relatable, Ask the Professional. So I first just want to say, with all the turn of events and everything that's been going on, how have you guys been personally?
I'll go first. It has been challenging. First of all, making the transition from working in an office to doing mostly teletherapy has been challenging, and there's been a learning curve. How do I tune in to the experience of my client without being able to sort of touch them and feel them? And then recognizing that many of them have been disconnected, are in isolation, really needing what they get from us. And I feel as though I've been sort of going over in terms of my expressiveness with clients because of the distancing. People are really struggling right now.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And we've got to practice our self-care, right, Victoria?
Yes.
I mean, we've got to take care of us.
Yeah.
To be able to take care of anybody else.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on. I mean, just piggybacking on what Pam said, just the transference to doing exclusively telehealth and things like that, and the social distancing, and then the current events on top of this pandemic, just the police brutality that we've known has been going on for a long time, but just something that it's really pressing. I mean, I work with a lot of teens, and that's a topic that is coming up a lot, and just how we're, handling it ourselves and how to be supportive of that. And so, yeah, it's just, there's so much going on right now in the world.
And we can definitely understand why, I guess, the suicide hotline has gone up. I think between everything with COVID and stay-at-home orders, and then with the tornadoes that happened too in Tennessee earlier in the month, and now with all the racial profiling and between George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery, all of those issues that were there are now at the forefront, and we're having to deal with it, and it's smack dab in our face. So
Yes.
for you guys, I know with you guys working with families as well as teens, have they expressed and concern with what's going on with the rioting and the protesting, and what do you, I guess most importantly too, what do you say to them to offer them comfort or anything?
So first off, even before all of that tension, just with COVID, there was a lot of narrative that's been negative. And so I've worked very hard with my clients to, can we find the positive story? Can we find any sort of silver lining in your day, in this situation? Because there's been such a saturation of negativity and uncertainty, which breeds anxiety and breeds depression. And the inability to engage in normal distraction type activities, normal feel-good activities that help with anxiety, like working out, like hanging with friends, and all of those sorts of things. So yeah, this has really, really come up. And so then with the addition of those other external stressors, people are really, really struggling. They're struggling with being able to sleep. They're struggling with feeling safe. Some of them in their homes already, everyone thrown together, and they're not used to that. And so that's an added component of, gosh, we don't normally all hang together. And then it's not safe out there.
Yeah.
So
where is it safe,
where
right?
is it safe? Where is it safe? Yeah. So
if you're not safe in your home, then, and I think about that too. What about all those times where children have felt safe being in school, to get away from violence? And so then they're back in the environment that they were trying to get away from. And so they've been quarantined. Literally, we've been quarantined, but being quarantined in that home where there is child abuse, domestic violence, and they're seeing all these things, they're witnessing all these things.
So living with the enemy. Maybe the only person they had that was safe was their guidance counselor, maybe the principal, maybe a teacher, maybe a couple of friends who really, really got it. And yet now, here they are. We know that all of the numbers are up exponentially for domestic violence, for child abuse,
for child abuse, yep.
All of the
divorce
numbers.
Divorce rates and separations. Well, I guess they can't really separate, but the idea of the separation, I've heard some of that reports and statistics on, divorce rates growing up, and them doing it over phone, just so, there's just so much, like you said. I know that specifically, Samantha, about just the racial tensions. I've had a lot of families bring up that families that I work with that have biracial children, or or situations where they're adopted, maybe by white parents, but they're a child of color, or grandparents raising their child of color, or their biracial grandchild, right? Just not knowing what to do. How, never having these conversations before and feeling like we need to now. A lot of that, asking, books, people joining book clubs and reading books about white privilege and trying to saturate themselves. And, and to your question about what are we saying for comfort, the number one thing I, offer, and encourage people to do too is listen. Let's shut our traps for a while sometimes, and just listen and let them get it out any way that they can. And self-compassion. I've been encouraging, especially with, families that, maybe their children are biracial, and they're like, gosh, I feel so horrible that I haven't advocated for my child more. I don't understand, and telling them self-compassion, like, you're doing it now. And that's what's huge.
That's right. I think that I've worked very hard at, and always do, we do as therapists, but we know that if we can tune into the subjective experience of another human being, we don't have to necessarily get it. We don't have to necessarily agree. But like Victoria said, when we listen, when we sit in that space with them, my youngest daughter is just turned 18, and she is biracial. She's Black and Filipino. And she wanted to go to the protest in Nashville in a really, really bad way. And that's something that's come up a lot in therapy, people wanting to go and show support, whether Black or white.
Mm-hmm.
And what do I do then about the safety for the medical, the physical
Right.
reasons?
Yes.
And so what we're seeing in our field is the physical toll that this disease is taking, and then the mental health toll, the emotional toll. So with her, she said, Mom, I don't know that I feel safe going there. I know that there's going to be a lot of people in a big crowd, and I don't want to infect anybody at home, and I don't want to get sick. So what can we do? What can we do instead? And so we talked about it here. We talked about it as a family. We all 5 got together and we sat and we read and we looked and we talked about how there are good in every single group of ethnic folks, of color, of nationality, and let's not single anybody out, and continuing to look at people as individuals and learn. How can we learn more about what it's like to be you? By building bridges of friendship and curiosity.
I love that you said building bridges, because I have my nonprofit called Build Her Bridge, and that's huge for me. I mean, huge. Our motto is real, raw, and relatable, and that's huge for me that you said that, is being real, being authentic, being who you are, and not feeling like you have to pretend to be anything that you're not, but also being a young adult almost and saying, like, I need help. I'm tired of struggling with these thoughts and these feelings. And I shouldn't be considered or labeled psycho or crazy because I'm feeling anxious and I'm feeling these thoughts and I need to get it out.
Absolutely. And Victoria, I know you'll attest to this. One of the things that we do just as a primary baseline therapeutic treatment protocol is normalization.
Yeah.
And people feel so much better when they know it's not just you. That's really normal. That's a really normal reaction to an abnormal event. And then providing hope. And you know what? We can help it get better. You as one person can, us together understanding one another can, and just providing that. I don't know how else to say it other than providing
a sense of normalcy.
That sense of normalcy. Because we feel alone when we're depressed. We feel alone when we're anxious. It tends to make us pull in, and then we only have the voice in our head. So the idea that lots of people are struggling right now, and I say, I don't know about you, Victoria, but I say that to just about everybody's struggling right now. It's hard for a whole bunch of different reasons. And you are so normal and you are so real, and anybody would react like that given that set of circumstances. And then providing people with resources, things to do that are positive instead of negative. Instead of being on Facebook for 10 hours, which is the national average per day for the American social media feed. Don't do that. Don't feed yourself. Do something positive. Reach out and have a great conversation on FaceTime or Google Duo or WhatsApp with someone you trust, someone you care about, and just really, limit what's coming into your mind that's along the lines of negative.
Absolutely. So I have a quote here, the NAMI, which I love NAMI. I've done a lot of things with Build Her Bridge and NAMI, which is the National Alliance on Mental Illness. They posted this on their Instagram feed, and I loved it, and I wanted to get your opinion and your thoughts on this. The effect of racism and racial trauma on mental health is real and cannot be ignored. The disparity in access to mental health care in communities of color cannot be ignored. So I guess my question to you is, what would you do if you had the power to do so, to bring about reform and change with minorities dealing with mental illness? What's something that you would see implemented so that way African Americans and minorities, Asian communities, and Hispanics, giving them access to healthcare?
I'll jump in on that one. I really like that question. I mean, sometimes I wish I had you know, that solution focused one. If I had a miracle, if I went to sleep one day and woke up and there was a miracle, what would be different? So I'm like,
Yeah.
this is where, yes, the number one thing that comes to mind is the idea of making mental health care affordable for everyone.
Yeah.
You know, it is just, I remember, I mean, I tell this to my teens all the time. I wish that I would have had counseling as a teenager, but, you know, disclosing, you know, my own personal life is that, you know, we were, you know, poor.
Yeah.
We could not afford insurance. We could not afford the luxuries of that, you know, and how much the struggle would not have been so bad could I afford to go to that. That's the number one thing. I mean, some other things too, I mean, that I could just make a big list is judicial change. You know, the juvenile justice system is riddled with, I think the statistic in the last 4 years was like 50 to 75% of the teens in juvenile justice system have fit the criteria for mental health disorders. You know, I mean, just changing that and treating the juvenile justice system as more of a rehabilitative system versus punishment, executor, judge, and,
Right.
you know, jury and execution, you know, of our youth. And so, yeah, I
Yeah.
could say more, but I'm going to stop right there.
But you said something that's so crazy. You said the luxury of healthcare.
Mm.
Like, that's crazy. You did
How
not
I
have
felt.
the luxury of having healthcare. That's crazy to me that we're even, you know, like having that conversation, because I know some of the girls in our group are able to afford counselors, some are not, but $150 an hour, $200 an hour, like that's a matter of like paying my electric bill or like having my kid have therapy. And I'm like, sorry, but we need to keep the lights on, so you ain't gonna do it,
Right.
you know?
Or we need to eat, you know? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I wanted to say that I think one of the changes that needs to happen is happening over time and maybe a little bit more organically. And that is that as Blacks, as Asians, as Hispanics, as other minority groups tend to begin to come to therapy and see that, well, this is not that we straitjacket you away, and this is not that you're a weak man. This is a sign of strength, and everybody needs help sometimes.
Yes.
I mean, I know, having been in the field for 20 years, 10 years ago, Hispanic males were not coming into the office unless they were being forced to because of probation or forced to because their wife was going to leave them.
Yeah.
Now I have more male Hispanics than female Hispanics in my client caseload. So some of that change is happening, just shifting where, you know what, it's okay to go talk to somebody about what's going on with you, because we're all humans. And we are all trying to just make it through this life in the best way we can. And then I couldn't agree more with Victoria on the issue of how can we make this affordable, but not just affordable. It's a maze of choices and confusion. The average consumer doesn't even know the difference between a psychiatrist, a psychologist, and a psychotherapist. What does a social worker do? What does a licensed marriage and family therapist do? What is a psychiatric NP? Where do I go? And so we're very much lacking in getting information out there. And I would love to see a platform where we would just filled media with information about here's where you can go, not just if you're suicidal as in a hotline, but if you need to talk to somebody, here are some choices. We have very few choices in our community here that Victoria and I have talked multiple times about the fact that we need a resource directory so that it needs to be checked out so that it's top notch and we're not just sending somebody willy-nilly somewhere.
Right.
There are very few places that will go way low. And what I know from working in California, where I'm from, is that community clinics where we offered free mental health, we were bombarded and we were helping people and cross-referring from the medical side to the mental health side. And we need more places like that where we're wrapping around with services and providing parenting and individual counseling and job support and skills training and after-school care, where we have, I was a therapist on site where kids were doing homework and women were picking up groceries and those kinds of things. And we'll watch your kids while you get the help you need. We just need
huge.
way more.
That is
yeah.
That is huge. So tying in, we were talking earlier a little bit about sleep. How have you noticed the sleep deprivation with young people dealing with mental health, mental illness?
I'll go real quick.
I'd like to chime in on that one.
Adolescents aren't sleeping. Their sleep cycle, every single one of my adolescent clients is a hot mess. Unless they're on some type of routine where they've got sort of a designated time to practice their instrument and or do a little bit of book reading or something constructive, get outside and play, hang out with the pets. And then, yeah, I get it. You're not in your regular school situation. So, but how about you can go to bed by midnight instead of, I've got clients going to bed at 3 a.m, waking up at 3 p.m, their circadian rhythm's completely off. If you're not sleeping, yes, you're not functioning. If you're not going into REM sleep, you're not processing information. You're short fused, you're angry, you're tired, you're resilient. It's a really, really important element of mental health.
I love this question because that's like when I do talks at schools for parents, that's the number one thing that I talk about, talking about what are the risk factors, or what are the factors that affect your child's mental health? Number one on the list, or the top two, is sleep and diet. Top two things, and sleep, Pam, you mentioned the circadian rhythm, like when their children are only sleeping, I've got kids as young and clients that are as young as 10 years old that right now during pandemic time, right, during Corona time, they are going to bed at 3 or 4 in the morning, and there's no regulation on electronics or devices. And so I'm constantly talking to parents about the blue lights, the blue screen, and the getting 20 minutes of sunlight at minimum because of vitamin D, because of the huge effect. I mean, if you have kids that are taking any type of medication, medications, lack of sleep is not going to, they need to be meditating. We need to be meditating. But any type of lack of sleep, their medication is not going to be as effective, I mean, not only that, but, during your sleep cycle is when your brain is rejuvenating. It's one of the most heightened times. So all that times of brain development during teens and children, when they're in the most heightened seasons of their life of pruning, you'll prune forever, your brain prunes forever, but those are the most heightened times. And, you're cutting into brain development. Just mood. There's so many research about direct correlation with lack of sleep linked to depression and anxiety, higher rates. It's such a huge, huge correlator, and then diet, that's another one.
And then Samantha, tying in with what you mentioned earlier on, we have now these kids in these settings where their limbic system is completely aroused and they're in fight, flight, freeze because mom and dad won't stop arguing, or because everyone's home and somebody's using this space for an office, this space for an office. Or many of my clients have 10 people in their family, and so they can't go to sleep necessarily if Tio Sancho's on the sofa still watching movies at 3 a.m.
Right.
So sometimes it's an issue of the child being glued to their whatever device, but it's a matter of the household, or they're babysitting 8 siblings. Mom's trying to work and dad's gone. So it's complicated.
Yes, I saw something in, there was a study done by the comprehensive psychiatry that found a link between sleep issues and suicide in Black Americans, and inadequate sleep can escalate an emotional crisis. And so it's all interwoven. Literally, it is all intercorrelated. It's all like together. It's like a cycle. So lack of sleep, poor diet, leading to being an emotional wreck, leading to anxious thoughts, leading to suicidal thoughts. It's not a great circle of life. It's a terrible, vicious circle.
Yes.
And a lot of movement swings, speaking of diet, with the high carb diet that you see in lower socioeconomic.
Yeah, the refined sugar.
Yes, and sugar. and no serotonin producing foods, which is the calming neurotransmitter. So you're not getting the turkey and the chicken and the salmon and the peas and those kinds of blueberries and some of those foods that help also manage mood.
Yeah. Have you ever worked with a teen the first time you meeting them where they just said, I need help? Like, and just being so raw and so vulnerable and just saying, I need help? Or is it more you having to work towards building that kind of relationship with them in order for them to just almost puke their guts out about everything that's been going on? I mean, what is your interaction when you're first meeting that teen? Are they a lot more open? Are they withdrawn?
I'll answer first, Victoria, really quickly. And my answer would be that it's all over the board. Some teens walk in and it's just all over them that they're not functioning well. Maybe they're real agitated and nervous looking. Maybe they're really sort of slumped over and sort of, slouching back in the seat. With others, it's they put forth a good show, but you can see through it. And others I've had just outright say, I just can't do it anymore. I don't have any friends. It's terrible at home. I don't think my parents love me. I don't think they want me. I have a new stepdad. He's really mean to me. I've thought of, or they've tried before and they were unsuccessful. And so they begin to talk about it. Maybe, I'm thinking of it again. I don't know what you've seen, Victoria, in your practice.
I would totally, absolutely echo that. They're all over the board. I mean, sometimes it's like personality styles, I would say too that, not that I have a statistic, so disclaimer, I don't have a statistic per se, but I do notice that my clients of color are slow to warm up. And just my theory in that, with some of the research I have read and just kind of carrying that on, is the stigma in a lot of clients of color, minority groups, or cultures of, we don't talk about these things. Yeah. We don't talk about feelings. You pull up your bootstraps and you move on, right. Or you only go to I'm speaking for my own Latino culture, but a theme of, you only go to a counselor because you're crazy, right. That's the only time you ever go, and so
if I'm illegal, if my parents are illegal, what will happen with me if I speak up about what's going on at home, or I
undocumented, right? Yes.
So I don't trust the government. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I would say, is that I've noticed a trend in my clientele of a little bit more slow to warm up. I say that because eventually they do, Yeah. But yeah, it's uncomfortable. They've never done that before. I've asked teenagers, even at 17 years old, to stop in session and let's check in. What are you feeling? Notice what you're feeling right now. And they're like, what?
Right.
Like, what do you mean? I have a parent that I did the same thing. I do that with their child every session, and they've gotten used to it. I did with the parent, and the parent was kind of freaking out.
Yeah.
Like, what? What do you mean? What do I feel? And right. Where do I feel it? Like they've never experienced that. So when you have that, lack of, living in a family where it was okay to talk about, then the teens have a little bit more hard time too.
One thing I noticed too is that if people say, so how are you? You're like, fine, even though you're not fine, it's you just brushing it off because you're like, it's just small talk, but if you really want to know how I'm doing, but then it's like, I don't really want to share my feelings with you, or do you really want to know how I'm doing? And it's almost like the don't ask kind of thing, if you really, really want to know how I'm doing, if you really, really want to know how I'm doing, I'll tell you, I'll spill out everything. But sometimes people are a little timid and are a little afraid to really warm up,
And one of the other things that I thought of while Victoria was sharing is that oftentimes, oftentimes there's a parents have had such a hard life. Uh, Again, I'm speaking mostly of African Americans and Hispanics that I've worked with. And so the child, you're having a hard time. Oh, come on. You have no idea
What
what
I went
the
through.
heart is like. And so there's no space for them to even go there. So they keep it in. And I've found with those clients that when I do say, your feelings really are valid. And here's your parents' perspective, and I get that too, but you have a right to feel the way you feel, and this is hard for you. And you're living in dual cultures, or your experience wasn't what grandma's was, but that doesn't mean yours isn't real and important.
Right.
So
Yeah. So can you explain what's the difference between suicide ideation, attempts, and deaths?
Victoria, did you want to go?
So I was like, I don't know. Okay, so suicide ideations, I mean, in layman terms, it's just the idea of having the idea of wanting to self-harm. So to kill yourself. So example is, I'm going to use teens because I work with teens and kids, I've had enough, my parents have been fighting for so long. My uncle killed himself, 3 years ago, and I've been thinking about it. I have a thought, sometimes I see an image of me taking a pill. So you're having an idea, right? But you haven't committed. You're having an idea. I don't know. You want to chime in on the next one, Pam? Or
Well, and the idea that you have not articulated a plan,
right,
an opportunity, and so it isn't as concrete or fixed. You haven't been ruminating about it. It's more a thought. And I always differentiate with my clients, like, are you feeling like you really want to die? Or are you feeling like it's just so hard right now, you just don't know how to go on? And that can help. And then
is it enough to have a hotline number or a text number, or what else is it that you think society needs to do? What is it that council and policy changes, what else needs to happen? Because I personally don't think that a hotline or a text is enough, but then I don't know what is. So being that you guys are the professionals, we're asking the professionals, what is it that you think we need to do to sort of get the move on with maybe texting is not enough. What is it that can be enough? What is it that you think needs to happen?
Well, one thing that I think for sure is that wherever children are, wherever teens are, those people who are entrusted with caring for them during that time, whether it's teachers, administrators, counselors, therapists, the community, the church, the club, the Taekwondo teacher, we have to really be paying attention. And I think more training for watching for the signs of depression, for watching for the signs of anxiety, and maybe some kind of a resource link or number that anyone can access to say, listen, I just was really concerned about this kid, or something that they could hand out. So we don't have to call, Department of Child Protective Services. We've got something that we can use as a preventative measure. And I think there are a lot of hands-off policies. I don't want to get involved. Or we're running too fast. We're not paying attention to the experience of someone to look for those signs. Oftentimes there are really clear signs, and they go missed.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, Victoria?
Yeah, I think you did a lot of great stuff, Pam. I would just kind of echo and add education. Getting families. I mean, community. I've seen so many community activism on certain things. And getting that on social media. Setting up community talks, educating families through the schools, where every facet, like you said, there's so many. Like, I just want to be hands off. Not making it taboo. I think. Yes, more. I think that the texting and the lines are a good start, but kind of implementing these other things and having a big drive of, getting it out there to talk, the information. What do we do? What do we say? Who are the people that can be there to support? and the families, like getting the parents or grandparents, whoever is taking care of these children at home, teaching them how to listen, for the signs.
I was thinking too of, we have in schools like a peer consultation type groups that kids who are kids care about other kids, or who are doing well and want to do more. They're a group of folks that the kids can go to. I would love to see more of that happening, that everybody's tied in and plugged in somewhere and somehow. And because school is the place where most kids will be at some point, I'm hoping, to have, as Victoria said, that information there for them, that they don't have to see a hotline ad on TV or on social media or whatever, but it's in their classroom. It's handed out. There are speakers. They've got a list where they can call in maybe and talk with peers about the struggle that they have and about some ideas for feeling better. So just, I guess making it more grassroots is what I'm saying, or making it just more accessible.
That's what Victoria and I were saying, is just talking about it.
Yeah.
And giving resources is a great idea. But with 2 minutes left to go, I want to leave the floor to you guys for just some final thoughts. What is it that you would encourage a teenager right now who's struggling, a parent that's struggling, a guidance counselor that's like, I need to step my game up because this spring I have really not been doing the best, or I need to do X, Y, and Z better. What is it that you would, and this is like all across the board, so I guess pick which, audience you would like to speak to. But Victoria, I'll start with you. Like, what would you like to say? Who's your target audience right now? What do you want to say to them?
Yeah, I mean, my target audience is kids, teens, and families, right? Just kind of echoing, just, conversating, open, don't be afraid. I mean, I've been telling clients, family sessions, like having these serious conversations that they've never had before. Now is the time. If you weren't doing it now, ask your kids, check in. It might feel uncomfortable. And teens, children, it might feel uncomfortable, but express yourself to your parents. If you want help, tell your parents, let them know, tell your grandparents, whoever your foster parent, whoever is taking care of you, let your voice be heard. And if they don't want to listen, connect to someone who will. Think about those people that have been in your life.
Love that. Dr. Pam, what about you?
I think that everything starts with the family. I really do. And so I think that my message would also be to the family that, especially right now, we've got to think outside the box. We've got to be a little creative with instead of focusing on all that we can't do, I think we have to focus on what we can do. And kids are starved for spending time with their parents. And so I just think, again, what can we do together that would be fun? What kind of game can we make with just paper and crayons that we can play together? Bringing laughter in, checking in and getting to know when we work with couples, we talk about building love maps. I think that families need love maps. What's your, if you were a Martian, what would you say? Where would you go? Do you like underwear? I don't know, whatever it is, but laughing and making family fun. And secondly, self-care.
Oh, we've got less than a minute.
Yeah, self-care. Parents have got to take care of themselves, or they won't be able to take care of all that's been entrusted to them. And they teach their kids to take care of themselves by modeling it.
Yes. Thank you so much, you guys. I know I have learned a lot. I hope everybody tuning in has learned a lot. Thank you to Victoria Valdez and Dr. Pamela Kaufman. I so appreciate you guys for just taking the time out to talk to me. And we're going to post this out everywhere and make sure we get it out there for everybody to see it. So be on the lookout for it. It'll be on YouTube. It'll be on Facebook and everything. So huge thank you to you guys. I appreciate you.
Thank you to you.